something strange is happening in the VR industry right now. Meta, the company that has spent more money on VR than anyone in history, just raised the price of their Meta Quest. And the Steam Frame, the headset a lot of us have been waiting years for, has been delayed. And then PlayStation has increased the price of their consoles, which probably affects sales of the PlayStation VR too. And we need to talk about why all of this is happening at the same time. Because when hardware companies start raising prices instead of lowering them, and when launches start getting delayed, that's not a sign of a healthy industry. There's a sign, there's a problem. And the problem is the supply chain. So today I want to talk about what's actually going on, why it matters, and what it might mean for the future of VR. Because honestly, I don't think we're getting another major VR headset anytime soon. And yes, that might mean the Steam Frame. So hang around because we'll be talking about that in great detail. But let's start with the big problem. There's a massive global shortage of the components that modern hardware is made from. And it's not a coincidence. There's a real specific reason for it, and of course, it's because of AI. Every major tech company on the planet is in an arms race right now to build AI infrastructure, and that infrastructure runs on chips. Specifically, the same kind of semiconductors and memory that VR headsets and gaming PCs and consoles all rely on. AI data centers are now striking direct deals with chip manufacturers to lock up supply, and RAM in particular has gone through what some people are now calling the RAM-pocalypse, because global memory prices have skyrocketed because of it. And when Nvidia and AMD are selling every chip they can to make data centers for increased margins, guess who gets pushed to the back of the line? Consumer hardware, including VR. Then there's the geopolitical layer. The conflict in Iran has disrupted shipping routes and rare earth mineral supplies that the entire electronics industry depends on. These aren't things you can just swap out or find an alternative for overnight. So when supply chains get squeezed at this level, the ripple effects can take years to work through. So we may not see the end of this anytime soon. And it's not just VR feeling this. Look at the wider tech and gaming industry right now. Sony has just raised the price of the PlayStation 5. Years into its life cycle, prices should be coming down, not up. And PC parts have become absurdly expensive. GPUs that should be mainstream are priced like luxury items. And building a decent gaming PC right now costs significantly more than it did a year ago. And the entire consumer electronics space is feeling the pressure. But VR is uniquely vulnerable. Headsets are niche, low volume, high complex devices. They need specific displays, custom processors, and precision optics. VR manufacturers don't get the kind of priority that Samsung or Apple gets when supply gets tight. So when the rest of the industry is already struggling, it puts VR at the bottom of the priority list. Now let's talk about what manufacturers are actually doing in response, because their reaction right now kind of shows that maybe they're spooked. Meta has just raised the price of the Quest 3 and 3S, which is a pretty big deal. Meta has spent tens of billions of dollars building out its VR division. Their whole strategy was get the headset into as many hands as possible, then make the money back through software, services, and the metaverse. That was the goal. That's why the original Quest 2 launched at $299, to undercut everyone, dominate the market, and grow VR into something mainstream. So what does it mean when years into that strategy, Meta is raising the price instead of lowering it? It means they're not betting on growth anymore. They're protecting margins. And Zuckerberg even confirmed in a recent statement that they're trying to make VR sustainable. In short term, the Quest 3 was already a tough sell to a lot of people at its original price, and now it's going to be even tougher. That's probably going to affect adoption, and which means fewer headsets sold, which means a smaller install base, which means less reason for developers to invest in big VR projects, which could mean fewer reasons for new people to buy VR headsets. And long term, what does that mean for the Quest 4? Well, there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of leaks, a lot of when's the next Quest coming? And I'm here to tell you, I don't think we're going to see a Quest 4 anytime soon. To launch a successor, Meta would need to source new high-end components in massive quantities. They need to absorb significant manufacturing costs to hit a competitive price. They need to actually believe the market is big enough to justify that investment. And right now, none of those things are viable. Components are limited and expensive. And Meta's appetite to subsidize hardware has shrunk, especially when their Ray-Ban Metas are proving more profitable. They even said it themselves, the VR gravy train is over, and VR hasn't become as mainstream as they wanted. And combine that with everything else we've heard, like Meta restructuring its VR division and prioritizing AI over reality labs, as well as the ongoing financial scrutiny on how much money the metaverse division has burned through. We all know Meta is recalibrating, and I don't think Meta has given up on VR, but their actions suggest that maybe they're no longer pushing for the aggressive growth that they once were. So if you're holding out for a Quest 4, I'd settle in. We could be looking at years, not months. Now, we can't talk about this topic without, of course, talking about the Steam Frame, because nothing demonstrates the state of the VR industry right now more clearly than what's happening with the Steam Frame. And for the people who haven't been following along, Steam Frame is Valve's first series of VR hardware in years. It's the spiritual successor to the Valve Index and designed to be the headset that finally reinvigorates PC VR again. And the hype around it has been enormous. This is Valve. This is the company that made Half-Life Alyx, still one of the best VR games ever made, even 4 years later. And this is the company that built Steam, the platform that pretty much runs PC gaming. When Valve enters the market, people pay attention. And the entire PC VR community has been holding its breath for this headset. The Steam Frame was supposed to be a big deal. After years of Quest dominance pushing developers towards standalone VR, and after years of high-end PC VR feeling neglected and forgotten, Valve was supposed to come in and remind the industry what serious VR hardware looks like. New tracking, controllers, new streaming tech, all with a powerful gaming PC behind it and in it. It's a device built by people who actually understand VR, not just people trying to sell hardware or a metaverse. But now it's delayed, and the reason isn't design or software, and it isn't Valve being Valve and taking forever like they always do. It's RAM. Valve has openly confirmed that the global memory shortage, same one driving up PC and PlayStation prices, has forced them to delay both the Steam Frame and the Steam Machine, and revisit pricing for both. But funnily enough, Valve's new Steam controller has just launched, and it's the only piece of their new hardware lineup that's actually shipping on time, because of course, it doesn't contain any RAM or storage. And I will add, there's currently rumors that Valve has received shipments of some gaming consoles, so maybe we'll see the Steam Machine before the Steam Frame. I just hope that doesn't mean the Steam Frame is at the bottom of the priority list. It may not be all good though, because according to leaked internal information, Valve's pricing targets for both Steam Frame and Steam Machine have skyrocketed compared to what they would have been before the RAM crisis. There's even a real chance the Steam Machine ends up being more expensive than the Steam Frame VR headset. That's how much this supply crisis has changed Valve plans. A complete inversion of what they originally intended. And I really think this is the canary in the coal mine, because if Valve, a company with massive resources and reputation across the hardware industry, can't get the parts they need, what does that say about everyone else? Like, smaller hardware manufacturers don't have Valve's leverage. They can't outbid AI companies for chip allocation, and they can't absorb the same kind of cost increases like Meta would. Because if the Steam Frame is delayed, every other VR project in development is in even worse shape. Like, small manufacturers like Big Screen, Pimax, or Shiftall, they're all dependent on the same constrained supply chain, and they have a fraction of Valve's bargaining power. But to be fair, luckily some of these headsets don't use RAM or storage, so the crisis could be their time to shine. But here's the part that worries me the most. Steam Frame was supposed to do something more than just sell headsets. It was hopefully going to re-energize the entire PC VR ecosystem. New hardware drives new software. And when the Index launched, it pushed developers to build for higher-end VR. When Half-Life Alyx launched, it proved what PC VR could be. Steam Frame was supposed to be the next moment like that. It gave developers a reason to invest in ambitious PC VR projects again. But if Steam Frame launches late or launches expensive and launches into a market that's already grown tired of waiting, because Steam Frame isn't just a headset, it's the bet that PC VR has a future, and a bet that maybe Meta could have a competitor. But right now, we could be in trouble. And this is the part I get worried about. It's not just that we're not getting new headsets, it's what we're losing. We're losing experimentation. Small hardware manufacturers throwing their hat in the ring with their weird, ambitious, experimental stuff. Like the Big Screen Beyond. It's a tiny niche headset built around a totally different vision of what VR could be. Or Pimax pushing absurdly wide field of view. Or Play for Dream pushing mixed reality PC VR headset. Or even all the niche full-body tracking projects like the Flux Pose. They're all smaller hardware manufacturers who love VR and are willing to give it a go. VR was finally getting interesting again. After years of VR being dominated by Meta, we were starting to see real experimentation. The space was getting interesting, and that's where innovation happened. And I'm worried that's about to stop. That kind of experimentation needs cheap, available components. It needs manufacturers willing to take risks on small production runs. It needs investors willing to bet on experimental hardware. And every single one of those things could be drying up. When components are limited and expensive, experimental hardware dies. While the big players can still afford to ship at higher prices because they have the brand and the install base to absorb absorb it. But the smaller manufacturers, the ones doing the interesting work and the ones pushing the medium in unexpected ways, they can't compete for the same chips. They can't justify the higher cost to investors, and they can't ship at prices that make sense for niche audiences. So what we're losing isn't just a Quest 4 or the Steam frames, we're losing the next Play for Dream headset, or the next Pimax or Pico, the next niche VR headset or accessory that nobody saw coming. Because look at what's already happening. Now, I want to be very clear about something. I hope I'm very wrong about all of this. If RAM prices stabilize faster than expected, we may see the Steam frame next week, or even a Quest 4 next year. And I would be absolutely stoked if that happens. I promise it's not all doom and gloom, because this video may be a bit morbid, but honestly, even with everything I've talked about, VR right now is in the strongest place it has been as a whole. And while it currently has some challenges, it's just a blip in the grand scheme of things, because VR is already great. The Quest 3 is a phenomenal headset. It's the best standalone VR experience that has ever existed, and still widely available. The PlayStation VR 2 is a stunning piece of hardware, with some of the most beautiful VR games ever made on it. We even have things like the entire UE VR mod scene opening up, with flat games like Cyberpunk and Hogwarts Legacy in VR, and the Skyrim VR still being modded a decade later. And we're getting genuinely incredible new releases like Behemoth, Batman, Metro Awakening, Little Nightmares VR, the EXD games, and the software side of VR has never been more interesting. And the hardware we have is going to keep working. The Quest 3 isn't going to stop being amazing because Quest 4 is delayed. The PlayStation VR 2 isn't going to suddenly get worse. The headsets in our cupboards are still capable of delivering experiences that nothing else in gaming can match. So yes, the road ahead for new VR hardware, it might be a little uncertain. We're probably in for a slow couple of years, and the experimental stuff might dry up for a while. And while the Quest 4 may not be around the corner, and the Steam frame may take a while or be expensive, but I hope I'm wrong. But that doesn't mean VR is in trouble as a medium. The headsets we have are great, the games coming out are great, and honestly, maybe a slower hardware cycle is what gives developers time to actually build for the platforms that exist, instead of constantly chasing the next thing. Maybe this period gives the software side a chance to catch up. So my honest take, if you're new to VR, this is still one of the best times ever to get in. If you already own a headset, you've got more incredible games to play than you'll ever have time for. And if you're waiting for the next big hardware leap, you might need to settle in, because it could take a while. But what we have right now is genuinely worth celebrating. VR isn't dead, and it isn't dying. The future of VR hardware might be a little bit slow, but the future of VR itself has never looked better. Thanks for watching this video. I cover VR hardware and games every week, so make sure to subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!